welcome back to my channel. My name's Cole Anderson, and today we're talking about a delightful little miniature by Chopin, one of his most popular waltzes, the waltz popularly known as the Valse de l'Adieu. And this waltz has something in common with a number of other popular Chopin pieces, including the Fantasy Impromptu and also this C-sharp minor nocturne. And what that is that these pieces were all published without Chopin's consent. Actually, Chopin, on his deathbed, left instructions that the manuscripts for these works should be destroyed. But Chopin's friend and student Julien Fontana disregarded his instructions and had the works published soon after Chopin's death. I think we're all probably glad that he did that, since these pieces have now become some of the most popular of Chopin's works. So why was Chopin so adamant that these works should not be published after his death? Well, it's pretty simple actually. Chopin was pretty obsessive about how he revised his works in preparing them for publication. And it was well documented how he would go back and forth making slight changes bar by bar before he would finally be satisfied with a version to send to a publisher. And the fact that he would do this repeatedly for each new publisher that he would send a work to means that we have multiple published versions of many of his works with small details that have been changed from one to the other. It's oftentimes not easy to decide what is actually the authoritative version. Chopin was similar to some of his contemporaries, near contemporaries like Brahms, for instance, in being extremely conscious of what his legacy was going to be and trying to control as carefully as possible all the music that was published under his name. So any work that has an opus number larger than opus 65, which is the cello and piano sonata, was published without Chopin's consent after his death. So the only manuscript copies of this work that exist outside of the edition that Fontana had published after Chopin's death are two manuscripts, the first of which was written for Maria Wodzinska. And Maria Wodzinska was the daughter of some of Chopin's friends from Warsaw, from back in Poland, that he met again in Dresden, in Germany, in 1835. And Chopin was apparently quite taken with Maria Wodzinska and actually wanted to marry her. In fact, they were unofficially engaged for a number of years. Maria's parents ended up putting an end to it, though they didn't quite approve of the weakness of Chopin's health and his status as a musician. But this waltz was written as a keepsake for Maria in 1835 at the end of their stay in Dresden together. And there's another manuscript as well, which dates from 1842, and Chopin apparently wrote this version of the piece for Charlotte de Rothschild. And Charlotte was the daughter of two members of the famous Rothschild family. They were very powerful in Paris at that time and were devoted patrons of the arts. Chopin also dedicated his Fourth Ballade and his C-sharp minor waltz opus 64 to Charlotte Rothschild in acknowledgement of the enormous support that her parents had provided for him. And it's likely that there was a third manuscript as well at some point in existence, probably that Fontana had in his possession. And the reason for this is that there's numerous changes between these two manuscript versions and the published version by Fontana. And it's possible that some of these changes may have been Fontana's own elaborations. So for example, Fontana normalizes the form a little bit. In the manuscript copies, Chopin writes a waltz and a trio, and both the waltz and the trio are in binary form, but he does not repeat the second half of the binary form in either case, as would have been customary. It would have been customary to have both sections repeated. So I suspect that Fontana probably added this in for the edition, but there's a couple of other small details that may have actually had their source in a manuscript that is now lost. The main theme of the waltz itself has kind of a wonderful tonal ambiguity. It just seems to hover in between A flat major and F minor. And there's this wonderful kind of evanescence about the entire piece. It feels like it encapsulates a kind of fond memory that is fleeting and cannot really be grasped. So for that reason, I really much prefer the slightly shorter version from the manuscripts. And I also like a few of the details from the manuscripts that Chopin had for the main theme. I incorporate them as variants in the last statement of the waltz theme. I've marked all these changes in the score as well, so you can see where things are different from the printed score. Please enjoy this beautiful waltz by Chopin, and until next time.